What's up, Goon Squad? Welcome to the Week 8 preview edition of the Football Goons podcast. We're thrilled that you've taken the time to check out the show live on YouTube or via the podcast option on a variety of different platforms. Regardless of when or how you're listening, you are in the right place. 7 weeks of NFL football are in the books, and things are starting to take shape in terms of some real contenders and some real pretenders out there in the league. We're going to get into a loaded Week 8 discussion here in just a couple seconds. But first, let's kind of break the ice here on conversation. World Series kicks off tonight. I know this is not a baseball podcast. I know, other than maybe me and Rocco, mostly we don't care about baseball that much. But here's the $1 million question here. The team you root for is playing in the World Series hypothetically. Would you prefer to go to one of those World Series games or a regular season NFL game?
Oh, no brainer for me. I'd rather always go to a baseball game than a football game, no matter how much I like football in comparison. But seeing the Red Sox play in Fenway in October would be that's about as good as it gets for sports there.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Actually, I am like public enemy number one with the I don't care about baseball thing. I mean, literally right before we went live here, some guy from the Astros hit a home run in the World Series. I never heard of him before. So you're a starter on a World Series team, you might be all right. But I love going to baseball games. The awesome. Atmosphere is cool, and I think it's cool because it's laid back for me. But then when you tell me it's a World Series game, so maybe I get some of the intensity of going to a football game, but still the chill atmosphere of baseball. I think that would be a perfect combination because my main complaint with baseball is who cares if you lost tonight? Well, it's the World Series. I care if we lost tonight. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I would actually choose the World Series game. Again, kind of with deal too. If I could go to Philly, that'd be sweet.
Yeah, it's a totally different experience. It's kind of a trick question too, because like a regular season NFL game, been there, done that, I guess. But if we're talking about a World Series game, you really can't beat that atmosphere. And especially if you're amongst one of those passionate fan bases. I was lucky enough in 2012 to go to the National League Championship Series with the Phillies against the Giants. It was the game where they lost, and then Howard tore his Achilles, running out to first base on the last out of the game. So
good times.
I officially killed the Phillies dynasty, but but the atmosphere was unreal. It was the loudest I'd ever heard, anything to that point, and it was a fantastic game. So kind of a trick question, but I actually thought that somebody was going to say a football game, and I'm surprised no one did, but hey, enjoy the World Series. Go Alex Bregman. He's won me quite a few fantasy games this year. So
he's the guy that hit the home run. So good for him.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the next man up segment here. It's another week and another slew of injuries and bye weeks to deal with. If you're looking for a few answers on the waiver wire, here are some of the most added players so far this week, of course, with a little bit of Goon insight. Again, these are players who are being heavily added over the first couple days of the week here. So these are not necessarily our favorites or anything. We're just taking guys who are, being added in bulk at this point. First two names on the list, running backs of the Oakland Raiders, Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington. Marshawn Lynch is going to be suspended this week. This is going to be a tough matchup against Buffalo. Is there any appeal here for either of these guys, or maybe one more so than the other, even with just this one game?
I'm not interested. I think it's in Buffalo. I'm sure the weather is going to be terrible because it's Buffalo. I'm not sure they've seen sunshine in the last 8 years. And it's one game that you're getting them for. So I was actually just through Buffalo. It's not that bad, I guess. But yeah, it's one game you get them for. So what you don't know which one to sign, and it's a one and done deal. So yeah, and especially if you have a waiver priority, it's certainly not worth adding.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, they weren't doing anything with Lynch, and I think it's debatable that Lynch is a better player than either of them at this point. But from what I'm reading earlier in the week, you would have to tell me I'm getting a definite touch share from one over the other. And from
what percent for you?
70.
Yeah, okay.
65, 70 for one guy versus the other. Especially if it was Richard and I was in a PPR, I'd actually probably be on board. Even to spend my waiver priority, because we're at a point in the fantasy season where that one win could make a world of difference. If you're sitting here right now and you're floundering at 3 and 4, well, this is a pretty important game for me, to secure a win with Richard. But for me, regardless of settings, it looks like a 50-50. They're going to ride the hot hand. And good for you if you guess right, but if you don't, you're going to be sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's too much of a guessing game. Just to kind of wrap this one up with something totally out of left field. Deal, you mentioned Buffalo is really not that bad. That's as long as you stay out of the parking lot pregame.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw any of those wackos. Yeah. I mean, they put Rocco and I, they take us out of the loony bin.
You were joking about putting people through tables. They were jumping through tables.
I mean, we were sort of joking about it, and they're jumping through ones that are on fire. These people are insane in Buffalo.
Yeah, don't go to Buffalo.
All right, division rival of the Bills is the Miami Dolphins. Let's talk about wide receiver Kenny Stills. He's coming off of a 2-touchdown game last week, and he's got a little bit of a productive history when Matt Moore is under center. He seems to target him quite a bit. So is there any interest in Kenny Stills as a wide receiver in fantasy at this point?
No.
Yeah. I don't want to – I looked through your list this week, South, and I was like, man, I'm going to seem like such a negative Nancy here. But I don't – I get what you're trying to fish at here with Matt Moore, but I'm always wary of – I'm wary of Deshaun Jackson in fantasy to a point. I'd still take him, but any of those players that are his type of guy, you know what I'm talking about, the 3 catches, just does one of them go for a score?
Right.
I'm nervous of, because you get Kenny Stills last week and he played well, and it wasn't just because he scored twice, but they're always so susceptible to that one catch for 31-yard game and we're done here. I don't know. I don't touch those guys. Maybe to my detriment sometimes, but I don't.
Oh, I'm not sure this one's to your detriment. It's a not great receiver and a worse quarterback. So, I mean, it's just – and there's still 2 guys ahead of him, at least in theory, that are better than him. So, yeah, I'm not interested.
And on top of all that, when you look at the matchup this week, the short week against the Ravens, this just smells like – I'm not even trying to be
2 for 18.
Too much here. Well, it just smells like 32 carries for Jay Ajayi on Thursday night. That's what it smells like for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I got to disagree with you guys a little bit. I'm interested. And I know this week is not that appealing, but, we just kind of hinted at that fact that you may be looking for that one player to kind of put you over the top. And again, it's a wild card, but considering that at this point you probably have some form of a wild card on your roster, whether you've been kind of juggling like a Ted Ginn or somebody else like that, why not take a chance on a guy who's most likely going to be heavily targeted based on the history here? And after that Ravens game, he's going to play the Raiders, the Panthers, the Buccaneers, and the Patriots. Those are 4 pretty friendly secondaries to play against from a fantasy perspective. So I think he's worth a flyer just from that perspective. Now, the schedule toward the end of the year gets a little tougher, obviously, but if you're kind of looking to catch lightning in a bottle, maybe for a couple of weeks, it might be worth a flyer, and I think that's why I would be drawn toward making this move. All right, another guy who we kind of talked about a couple of weeks ago is Latavius Murray. He had a big week this past week, the running back of the Vikings. He went for 113 yards and a touchdown last week. Is this a product of how the game flow went, or do we expect him to kind of take over more of that featured running back role in Minnesota?
I really think they prefer McKinnon, and I do too. When you watch the Vikings play, I really think at this point in their careers, call it what you want, McKinnon's a better player. And I don't know if this is what you meant by the game, how the game went. Latavius played great. I don't want to take anything away from him on Sunday. He played well. And to their credit, the Vikings rode that hot hand. But I do believe that week in, week out, they're going to give McKinnon every chance to be the hot hand. And then if Murray takes it, then fine. But as a fantasy owner, I don't want to rely on the hopes that McKinnon struggles early and Latavius breaks one, so they decide, that Lat's got it that day. So I wouldn't touch this one. I still want McKinnon in that backfield.
I agree. I think it's fool's gold. It's kind of like a 1 week thing. It was just he got hot with the way that he was carrying the ball. It just worked out for them. Again, McKinnon is clearly the more talented, the more versatile back. I think he's also a much better pass protector, which is a little bit underrated when you're talking about who's going to get snaps. So I just feel like ultimately it's going to kind of shift back toward his direction. And Cleveland, they're not a good football team, but the one thing that they can be stingy with is defending the run. So you're going to need a more versatile pass catching type back getting more snaps this week.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about wide receiver from the Steelers, Juju Smith-Schuster. Look, there's a lot of drama right now around this whole entire situation. An unwilling Instagram trash talk participant, Schuster is the clear-cut number 2 right now in Pittsburgh as far as the wide receivers go. He's got 3 touchdowns in 6 games, despite all of the turmoil there. He seems to be becoming a little bit more of a dependable target, especially in the red zone area, or when it comes time to maybe get a big play. Teams are focusing on AB a little bit. Is Juju worth a pickup here?
I actually think that he is. I do expect that offense still to turn it around a little more. I think Ben still does have it, even though he said he's not sure if he does. But, I think Juju is – I would take him ahead of Martavis at this point. And other than that, I'm not going to take any of their tight ends. So he's a clear number 2 receiving option other than Bell in that offense for me, and I expect them to start scoring more.
Yeah, I kind of sympathize with Martavis here. First off, Juju's nowhere near better than me either, so I get it. but I honestly, I don't want him. And I mean, I would roster him. I think he's worth a roster shot.
Yeah.
My nervousness here is, you were saying he's the number 2, and all said he's actually the number 3 behind Bell.
Right.
But this is completely different than literally every other team in the league. In their last 2 games, I looked this up. I couldn't believe it's true. In their last 2 games, the Steelers have 106 touches from rushes and receptions. Bell and Brown have 85 of them.
That's crazy.
So you're talking about 2 guys that are like 83.5% of the offense. Juju, yeah, he scored, and that's good, but I'm not going to rely on what is he getting, like 6% of the offensive touches, and I got to hope he's productive with that. So I'm just roster him, sure, because at some point you got to figure a defensive coach is going to try to get that number to like 70% for Bell and Brown. So, I mean, you can't just – and they've looked good. You can't just let the Steelers say, hey, here's our only 2 players who are going to touch the ball, and we're still going to put up 30. So in that case, hey, Juju's definitely worth the roster spot. He's a great player. He was great in college, and now he looks solid here. But until somebody takes the Bell Brown thing away, I can't start another Steeler. I can't even think about it.
If they would actually shift that to 70%, the rest of the team pretty much sucks. So Juju gets 30%.
Right.
That's awesome.
He's picking up a ton.
Yeah. He's going from 6 to 30.
All right. Well, let's talk about another wide receiver here. This is another boom or bust candidate here, but being added at high amounts right now, mostly due to a 7 for 141 performance last week for the Saints. We're talking about Ted Ginn Jr. Is he worth a roster spot, or even more specifically, a spot start here in the next couple of weeks where we have 6, 6, and 4 teams on a bye?
I think so. I mean, it's, I don't expect a 7 for 141. That's a great game. Yep. But he has been targeted a lot, and it almost feels like sort of we said this coming into the season. Obviously, the talent level is not quite the same, but he's just Brandon Cooks. Like that's the route tree he's running. That's the position he's playing for the Saints. And Drew Brees has proven over and over and over and over and over again in his career You don't have to be as good as Brandon Cooks for me to make you really productive. I like him, like you said, especially these next couple weeks. If you're out there, almost everybody is going to throw a flyer at the wall. So you could do you were trying to make this point for Kenny Stills, I think, South.
Yeah. And
I liked your point, but I like the player more here because I'd rather have a piece of the Saints passing game than the Dolphins. They're a run team, and you got to, you know what I mean? So, like, I loved your point. I just really like Ginn's situation a ton more.
Yeah, I think that Kenny Stills and Ted Ginn are pretty similar, but I'll take Drew Brees over Matt Moore pretty much all the time. So
sure?
It's close, but I would probably take Brees almost 100% of the time. Like on Breeze's bye week, I won't take him. That's the only percent. Yeah, he's actually the number one guy on all this list that I would take. Everybody you've listed here, he's the number one guy. He's still productive. He's still doing it. He still has Drew Brees as his quarterback, and their team is what they are right now. I mean, I guess Snead might come back at some point. Who knows what's going on there? But I think Ted Ginn's going to keep doing what he's been doing. Not 7 for 141, but he's going to keep running long routes and getting open. So he's going to keep being productive.
Yeah, I'm just bitter about it, to be honest with you, because I was all over Willie Snead.
Willie Snead's your dude.
And this is all of Willie Snead's production right here.
Right.
Like in a roundabout way. This was going to be his role, and I was just dead set on it, and the Saints are very clearly being deceptive about his health at this point. So there's something very seriously wrong. And I wouldn't be surprised if they sneak up like a last minute, like just throw Snead on IR for the rest of the year kind of move to get somebody else on the roster because he's clearly not healthy. I think Ted Ginn, you could do a lot worse than Ted Ginn at this point, especially over the next 3 or 4 weeks with all these buys. So I'm getting him in just about any area that I can.
Yeah.
All right, one more name, and it's kind of fitting that we're going to talk about this because Rocco is not with us tonight. He is cruising it up somewhere in the Atlantic. Hopefully they haven't thrown him off the boat yet.
Probably did.
Maybe. But let's talk about Josh McCown real quick because we hinted at these bye weeks. They're here in full force. McCown is playing surprisingly decent at this point. He's got multiple touchdown games in 4 of his last 6 games. Is Josh McCown a guy that you would consider during these bye weeks?
If you'd have told me in August that we were going to be talking about Josh McCown in the Week 8 podcast, I'm not. And here's why. I mean, I guess maybe a little different here, but quarterback's so deep right now that the guys that you actually drafted late are really playing out of their minds. You got these guys like Carson Wentz, who was a borderline draftable player. Alex Smith, borderline draftable player. They're 2 of the top 3 MVP candidates right now. So, I mean, I would venture a guess that, again, not talking multi-quarterback, I would venture a guess that almost every roster out there has a second quarterback they're totally ready to play if their first guy's on bye. And it may even be a situation where you took like Cam and Alex Smith and you're starting Cam on Alex's bye week kind of thing. You know what I mean? So
right.
I would guess that most people out there are pretty comfortable with their quarterback situation. If you're not, this is another like classic. You could do worse than McCown. I mean, they're not playing with a ton of leads out there, so they're chucking it, and he's making plays. He's playing well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that and say I'm in a 12-team league that everybody's active and good at fantasy football, and I have Cam and Rivers, and I can't trade a single one of them for anything. So, yeah, I don't think anybody really needs Josh McCown that bad at this point because pretty much everybody has a backup set.
Right.
Yeah, I just kind of bring this up because if you're in desperation mode here, I really like his schedule through the next 4.
Yeah, he has a good 4 weeks.
Like, you got Falcons, Bills, which is going to be a tougher game, but I mean, you could still throw the ball on them a little bit. Then you got the Bucs and Panthers. So I mean, if you're in a spot over that time frame where you need a spot start, and I kind of sneaky like him in daily. If you're looking for a deeper play over those couple periods, you're probably going to do a lot better. But if you're looking for a cheap option, you could do a lot worse here. So I'm not taking it off the radar is what I'm saying here. It's not as laughable as it seems. So
Right.
Yeah, I think it's one of those don't just gloss over it and laugh because it's A, Josh McCown, and B, the Jets quarterback. Like, those are two things you came into this season swearing you weren't going to touch.
Right.
and that you should shift your thinking a little bit, especially like you said, daily, like a tournament shot, $3 and a prayer. You're going to be the only guy in a 30,000 person tournament with Josh McCown.
Yep, most likely. And I mean, unless Rocco's in it, but
Right.
All right, let's talk about some of the bigger storylines around the league here. These are just a couple items that we want to hit on, give you our 2 cents pretty quickly here, and we'll fire through these. So you guys are forced to decide right now at this moment, are the Atlanta Falcons a playoff team?
What's the penalty for not deciding?
I
need to know.
You got to eat watermelon.
Yeah, I'll decide. I think they are. I would lean towards yes. I'm about 49%, but I would lean towards yes. I just think that offense has to take off. I think the defense kind of is what they are. Maybe not quite as youngry as last year, but they still play in a tough division. The division isn't quite as tough as they had started out, but yeah, I think that they're going to take off, and the rest of the division kind of figured out this is who we are. So yeah, I pick yes.
I'm actually going to go with yes as well. As disappointingly as they've been playing, and I'm not going to stand up for them at all, but just from a logistics standpoint of who makes the playoffs, they're still 3-0 in the NFC right now. They've beaten the Bears, the Packers, and the Lions. I don't think anybody's mistaken the Bears for a wild card threat, but the Packers and Lions are both right there in the wild card chase. So there's tiebreaker over both of them. All 3 of their losses right now are to AFC teams, which hurts because you lost 3 games. But when you talk about all the tiebreakers in the world, the Falcons are on top right now because they're undefeated in the NFC. So if this is their rough patch and they start to get it together, this rough patch really doesn't hurt you when it comes down to who's going and who's not. And most importantly, like I said, hey, you finished the same record as the Packers and the Lions. You got them. The Packers are actually in the worst shape because they've lost to Atlanta and New Orleans. That's rough.
And even in their division, they're only back 1 game. It's not like they're back 3 games at this point.
And they haven't played a division game yet. So you can still go 6-0 in the division. So I think they're, as hard as it is to say a team sitting pretty at 3-3 on a 3-game losing streak, they're actually sitting okay when you break down what the losses look like.
Right.
Yeah, I think they're in good position, and you guys hit the nail on the head. I mean, the most important thing is that at the very minimum at this point, they're definitely a wild card team. They've been inconsistent, and I get that, but like at some point, they're going to sit down and say, "All right, look, we're a 500 team right now. What do we have to do to get this thing course corrected?" And the light bulb is going to go off, and it's going to be, we just need to put the ball into the hands of the best playmakers on our team.
Oh, how about that?
Throw it to Julio. Figure out ways to get him the ball. Get Freeman and Coleman more actively involved in this thing. Sanu's going to get healthy here, and that's going to help. Stop running jet sweeps and getting cute with Taylor Gabriel when you have 2 of the better backs in the league. You know what I mean? It's just, I think that right now they're kind of outthinking themselves a little bit, and they'll get that course corrected.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor this, but we called this, and I'm sure we weren't alone in preview podcasts out there and stuff, but this was going to come down to how prideful is Steve Sarkisian. Like, you're taking over one of the top 3 or 4 offenses in the entire league. Like, I'm not expecting you to be Shanahan. Shanahan's one of the best play callers in the league. But you can be closer to him than this. Take a peek at what worked. Watch some film from last year. It's almost the same cast of characters. You didn't lose Devonta Freeman.
Right.
Matt Ryan didn't break his collarbone. They're all still there.
Yep.
Figure out what worked and mesh it with your thoughts. They'll get back on track. They're all right.
Yeah, this isn't your time to make an identity.
Right.
All right, give me the team who has surprisingly failed to live up to expectations at this point.
I'm going to say the Bengals, and I would not like to elaborate.
Why not?
Wait, from everybody's expectations, not just yours.
I said I would not like to elaborate.
I got to tell you, I got a little bit of a – I don't know if it's a surprising one or what. I'm going with the Browns. Browns are 0. They're the worst team in football again.
Yep.
And it's not close. Like, I know San Francisco just got blown out, but until then, all their games have been within a field goal.
Yep.
Cleveland is not sniffing victories. All right, fine. They just lost 12-9. Like, scored a touchdown one time. But I think beyond all of that, they were supposed to be like 7-9, showing some life, showing some signs of understanding the system they're in, playing really good defense. And they're just the Browns again. I guess it depends on what you think of expectations. Nobody thought they were a contender. I mean, a lot of people would probably answer this with the Raiders. They were supposed to be AFC favorites. They're struggling. They're not even 500. But for me, I think of Cleveland fans, and I just got to be like, we've been buying into this rebuild a little bit. All we have to look forward to is the draft again.
It's the Bucs for me. And I mean,
yeah, that's a good one too.
I wasn't thinking by any means that they're like world beaters, but at the very least, I thought they were a playoff contender, and they have not shown a shred of consistency on either side of the ball. I thought the defense would play better than they have to this point. I thought Jameis would kind of take a little bit of a next step here in his progression, and he still could, but to this point, he's looked as inconsistent as just about anybody at this point, not named Eli. So, I mean, it's just brutal. They got to get something figured out. It's another situation where they're not buried at this point, but they're in trouble because they've been super inconsistent to this point. And you're looking up at two teams, probably three in your own division, who are playing better than them right now and might ultimately be better than them. So, they could be in trouble. All right, here's a fun one. We kind of joked about this one over the weekend, and I decided to throw it in here. If you had the number one pick in next year's fantasy draft, who would you take as things stand right now?
I don't know if I want to say, because all the things I said I would do, people have stolen my thoughts that are in my leagues.
Well, I mean, you've had a long time to change your mind multiple times.
I'm not. That's true. I'm not going to get cute with this. I'd take Lev Bell. I mean, he's touched the ball like 90 times the last 2 weeks, and I'm kind of right. I'm a little off, but I'm really not that off. I think it's 70. You know what I mean? Like, if volume's king, and then you add to that he's one of the 3 or 4 most talented players in the league, how would you not want Bell? Like, how could you not say Bell? Now, like, maybe things change in Pittsburgh. Maybe Big Ben retires, and I do think that changes a lot.
Yeah.
But, if all stays exactly how it is, I want Bell. If Ben leaves, I'll take Zeke. I mean, I'm not going to get cute with this.
Yeah, for me, I would take Zeke ahead of Bell if we get this suspension garbage figured out. I don't think that there's any way that's getting figured out. If it does, if he serves this year or somehow gets sponged or whatever, then I'll take Zeke. If not, it has to be Bell for me still.
I think he is going to serve this year at some point, and I think that I would take him number one.
Yeah.
I mean, for as good as Bell is, you know what I mean? Like,
he's so good.
Bell still has a little bit of inconsistency here and there. Zeke doesn't have really any inconsistency. Like, if he's playing, barring like a very rare Broncos-esque performance against them, he's just destroying people still on the ground. And he's getting way more involved now in the passing game as well. Looks way too comfortable in that element. It's a scary thought right now. I think right now he's the number one.
I mean, he just went ahead and quietly had his best fantasies week of his career. So, I mean, he's just getting better and better.
Yeah, I will say the root of that question, I'm not sure. We've been talking about this. Next year is going to be a fun first round because it's not like grab a first 2 or 3 picks or you're dead. Like, we rattled off Zeke, Bell, and David Johnson was it this year. Now next year, everybody's just as comfortable with Gurley, Fournette, Melvin Gordon, Kareem Hunt. Depends where Saquon Barkley goes. Like, the running back is loaded going forward. But the cliff from that top tier to like LeGarrette Blount, you're in a little bit of trouble. You know what I mean?
Just a little bit.
We'll start saying here on October 24th, well before you're planning, Don't draft a wide receiver in the first round. Don't do it.
Did you write that one down, Miles?
Ouch.
No, I'm only picking on him because I told him that he was going to regret it. That's all.
I think we all did that. Yeah.
All right. Listen, last one here. It kind of came out today in all of this circus in Pittsburgh. Tomlin said that they've got a lot invested in Martavis Bryant, and they're really not planning on moving him at all. You know, I think in a worst case scenario, they just kind of send him home, you know, just for the sake of sending him home. But in a perfect scenario, give me a good fit for Martavis Bryant in a trade. You know, it could be a good fit for both sides or just the team he goes to.
I'm hesitant because at this point in time in a season, anybody who's an actual contender, I don't want this locker room problem. And he is. Like, he's a locker room problem. Whether it's God only knows if you're going to get suspended again, outwardly bashing the guys in your positional room. Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, fine. I hope every player thinks they're better than Juju. You know what I mean? Like, I hope Martavis Bryant thinks he's better than Antonio Brown. Like, you see all this stuff leading up to the NFL draft and who's the best running back here. And all four of them say me, because that's how you get to this level. You think you're the greatest. Like, so good. But don't come at a fan on Twitter and put your teammate down. Like, every GM just said, no thanks.
Yep,
you know, I'm good with Ted Ginn Jr.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm happy with that. Like, why would you trade? I don't understand why you would do it. Now, I know that wasn't the question, but that's why I hesitate, is the Steelers would probably take anything at this point to get him out of there, but who's giving up anything?
The Browns.
That might be a good move for Pittsburgh, because then you know you're tanking that team, but they don't need your help.
Yeah, I got to just say this. Like, I kind of agree with what you had said, Miles, but in that instance, I'm looking at a guy who probably has a little bit of a history of handling these kinds of things. And I'm looking at Big Red in Kansas City.
Yeah. I don't know why, but I knew you were going.
That's who I had written down too.
I mean, if you're just looking for just one more guy to put you basically over the top as an offense, and with a head coach who has a little bit of a history of taking on some problematic players and being productive, at least in the short term with them, you know, I think it would be a good fit. I don't know what Kansas City would have to give up or what Pittsburgh would look for. I don't think it matters. Kansas City's one of the deeper teams, so they probably have a contract to throw back to them or whatever. But I think that would be kind of the ideal fit. But I think we all sort of agree that nothing is going to happen here with Martavis Bryant.
Yeah, that could be fun though. You can't defend that.
No.
Oh my God.
You can't defend Bryant and Hill on the outside, so you're opening up the middle for Travis Kelce. Like, you can't defend that.
And Kareem Hunt.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, who do you even guard? That's some Madden stuff right there.
Right.
All right, let's take a second here and talk about our friends at Gorb. I'm going to spell it out for you. It's GHORBH. If you haven't heard, I'm not sure how you haven't, because Gorb is the movement that is taking over social media at this point. Everywhere I look, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever it is online, I'm seeing people posting about Gorb all the time. And Gorb tells us that in life, you've really only got two choices. You could either get hungry or you can be hungry. And we've kind of adopted that motto in terms of this podcast. We decided to just go after it. We're doing this thing every single week. We plug away. We appreciate everybody who is along for the ride with us. And we decided that, you know, we just wanted to get hungry and just go after our goals and our dreams with this thing, rather than just sit back and always be wishing that we had done something about it. And the cool thing about Gorb is that you can have a constant reminder about that mission statement, because they have some of the absolute best gear you can find anywhere. All different colors, all different styles, for men, women, kids, different accessories, all kinds of stuff. They have been making us look good for the past several weeks of the season. I know I've been wearing the hoodie quite a bit, not tonight because surprisingly it's like 100 degrees again all of a sudden in late October, but I've been looking good. I've been feeling good in the gear, and you've got to go check it out. GHORBH.com. Check out all the great stuff they have. You'll be looking good. You'll be feeling good. And it's all high quality stuff. Check them out, GHORBH.com. All right, guys, it is that time of the week for our Goons and Ghosts. Goons are the guys that we're starting and expecting them to outperform their ranking headed into this week. Usually a guy who's a little bit further down, a little more undervalued. The Ghosts are the guys that we expect to underperform, and they're usually ranked a little bit higher up on the rankings for the week. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to throw it to Deal, and he is going to give us his Goon of the week.
Well, I'm already pretty hype. I'm about 4 Minion Fruit Punch Capri Suns in, so I'm ready to share. Alex Smith is my Goon of the week. He is ranked quarterback 14. Listen, for Alex Smith to be ranked outside the top 10 right now is crazy. His average finish for the season is 8.14. He's the top scoring quarterback in the league. He's finished top 10 6 of the 7 weeks he's played. I know the Broncos defense has been great this season, just like normal, but Alex Smith has been abnormally good. Looking over the 13 guys ranked ahead of him, there's no way he's finishing quarterback 14 this week. Not only that, here's my bold prediction. Alex Smith is going to have the best game anyone has had all season on the Broncos. He hasn't even thrown a pick yet. Not one time. Alex Smith in 7 games has not thrown an interception. I'm looking for him to have 286 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. He's the Goon of the week.
All right, Miles, who do you got for us for your Goon of the week?
All right, I'm going to go. Let's have a little fun with this here tonight. I'm going a little bit off the radar. This is a player, not only is he my Goon, but I think a lot of you can pick him up off of free agency right now. I'm going with Josh Doctson, wide receiver from Washington. He's pre-ranked at 31 at wide receiver. He's coming fresh off a performance where he played 85% of Washington's snaps in Monday night's loss to the Eagles. That was the highest in the whole wide receiving corps. He has completely overtaken Terrell Pryor as the starting X receiver in Jay Gruden's offense, which for those of you who don't go with X's and O's, that's a big deal. I mean, that's a feature wide receiver in Washington. That's where Pierre Garçon had about 105 catches out of. Now, yes, that game against Philly, he did only connect 3 catches for 39 yards. But for the first time all year, actually, Philly did a good job of focusing on the outside receivers, forcing the ball inside, which led to the big day for Jordan Reed. But what I liked as far as making this guy my Goon is after the game, Jay Gruden's asked, why Doctson, where's Pryor? He said, we drafted Doctson to be our number one guy, to be our man, and he's finally healthy enough to do it. So I think they see Pryor and Crowder as kind of the complements to this guy's skill sets through the roof. He's excellent. And what I love more than anything, he's got a great opportunity to take that role on this week at home against Dallas. The Cowboys have given up the 5th most points to wide receivers. Large part of that is 8 touchdowns given up in their 6 games to wide receivers. And Doctson, while he has not been a big yards guy in his rarely healthy career, he has gotten into the end zone. So, I'm not going to sit here in front and say I think Doctson's going to tear up the league and he's going to finish with 200 yards or anything. But to be pre-ranked as an unstartable receiver and to be on a lot of waiver wires right now, I actually love him to land in the teens this week at wide receiver. 7 catches, 95 yards, and he'll score against the Cowboys in a critical must-win game for the Skins. You've got to pick this guy up.
All right, and I'll give you my Goon for week 8. It is Joe Mixtape, a.k.a. Joe Mixon, my guy, Cincinnati Bengals running back. Look, a lot of drama right now with him and Marvin Lewis, and rightfully so. Marvin's kind of just approaching it like, I don't want to hear you whining about your playing time. Mixon is approaching it like, dude, I averaged 7 yards a touch the first half of the game on Sunday, and then you just didn't give me the ball again for the rest of the game. What's up with that? I feel like there's going to be some kind of a happy medium here, because even though the coach doesn't want to hear that from his guy, he's got a really valid point. He's clearly the most dynamic and best back on that team on an offense that really has struggled to this point. They made a point a couple weeks ago to get AJ Green more involved because he was dynamic. Now they have to make a point to get Joe Mixon involved as well. I think this week is the week to do that. He's had a slow start to the year, but clearly, as I said, he's the best back on the team. He's averaged 7 yards per carry last week in that first half of the game against the Steelers, and then mysteriously didn't touch the ball basically again for the rest of the game. The team, from what I am reading, is going to make a point this week to get him the ball. I like that kind of thing. Last 4 games, he's averaging 16 touches. So if they're going to get him the ball more, and he's already averaging those 16 touches, I like him somewhere in the mid-20s, somewhere near 30 when you add in potential receptions. The Colts have given up 8 rushing touchdowns this year in 7 weeks of football. So if you're good at math, that's more than 1 a week. And I'm not good at math, and I still figured that out. All right. He fits, the defense they're facing is just like the kind of running back they don't want to see is basically Joe Mixon. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He could pick up yards after a catch. So he's going to be dangerous there. The team plans to make it a point to get him involved this week. You need to make it a point to get him in your lineups this week. 21 carries this week, 111 yards and a touchdown. And I'm adding 6 catches, 48 yards. Joe Mixtape is my goon this week. All right, let's talk about our ghosts. Miles, kick us off with your ghost.
Yeah, I think so. Similar to what I said, right before about Josh Doxson. I'm not going to go overboard here, and this isn't going to be some crazy extreme doomsday scenario, but I'm going to ghost Kareem Hunt, Kansas City's running back. He's pre-ranked number 3 at his position. And listen, Hunt's a beast. His role, and more importantly for fantasy purposes, his volume, not in question, nor should it be. However, he has, he came out on fire, and he's put up somewhat muted totals of late. He's been under 15 points 4 straight weeks in half-point PPR fantasy game. He scored 6 touchdowns in his first 3 career games, hasn't scored since. The last 4, he's been kept out of the end zone. So while he's still playing well and he's getting the ball, he has come back down to earth a little bit. But what I hate even more is he's facing Denver this week. And Deal likes Alex Smith against Denver. I sort of do too, because I don't like Kareem Hunt here. Denver is number 2 against fantasy running backs. Melvin Gordon is the only back week 1 to go up over 15 points against them this year in half PPR. Outside of a ridiculous asterisk poor performance against Orleans Darkwa and the Giants, I mean, that's the only guy that's gone over 60 yards on the ground against Denver this year. That's going to be a nice little trivia question at the end of the year. Orleans Darkwa, the only guy to go over 60. I do still like Hunt to get a decent workload in this game. I just believe too much in Denver's defense to give him – I mean, RB3 is ridiculous, as good as he is against the Broncos. It's unrealistic. He's still going to be startable. Don't take him out of your lineup unless you've got 2 better options out there, which is possible. He does have a chance of scoring through the air, but for me, I'm putting him at 80 total yards, no touchdowns. You're going to be very disappointed with your 8 points out of Kareem Hunt.
All right, my ghost this week is Michael Thomas of the New Orleans Saints. He's wide receiver number 5 this week in the pre-ranks at this point. The Bears defense is playing well to this point, even against the pass, which is something that we did not expect coming into this season. They were talking about trading starters away late in camp and figuring out, promoting guys from the practice squad that were just going to keep them competitive. None of that has really happened, and they've really been competitive on the defensive side of the football to this point. They're giving up just 1 touchdown per game at this point to wide receivers, which, you would think that, okay, so a wide receiver is going to score against them. Why not Michael Thomas? Well, Thomas has yet to really do a whole ton for the Saints this year. He hasn't eclipsed 100 yards in a game to this point this season. He's only got 2 touchdowns at week 7 mark heading into week 8 for the Saints. And this is a guy who was very highly targeted last year in the red zone. He caught a whole bunch of touchdowns last year, and it's just not translated over into this year for whatever reason. The Saints are running the ball a lot more. They're leaning heavily on Ingram and Kamara, which is smart They're throwing it to their backs a lot more, especially in the red zone. Kamara is eating up targets inside of the red zone. Michael Thomas only has 3 red zone targets to this point this year, after it felt like they forced him the ball over and over and over again in 2016. I don't see any way he's a top 10 wide receiver, let alone wide receiver number 5 this week. I got him 5 catches and 71 yards from Michael Thomas. He is my ghost this week. All right, let's talk about some daily fantasy football stuff here. We like to try and find you guys a good value play in daily fantasy football. And what that means is we're going a little bit further down. Well, that's a good point. Ryan Deal did not share his ghost yet. So before we jump into that, Deal, give us your ghost. I don't want to leave you out.
Yeah, this one's worth it. It's worth hearing. Jerick McKinnon is my ghost. RB11, yes. Running back number 11 in the entire league. Not on the Vikings. He's ranked running back 11 in the league, which is crazy. I know there are 6 teams on bye, but I still don't want Jerick McKinnon. I've been very clear on my feelings towards him. He did have one good game after I went on my anti-Jerick tirade, but then back to reality. This past week, he had 47 rushing yards to Murray's 113. Now, I'm not saying Latavius is a world beater, but I still think that he does have that job over Jerick. And I think they just continue to ride the hot hand there. And I just don't think this is a week where Jerick's hand gets hot. So I know he goes up against the Browns, and I know the Browns suck. But South stole my thunder a little bit earlier. The one shining part they have is they play well against the rush. They've given up the 6th fewest points to the running backs this season. They haven't given up more than 66 yards rushing to a back this season at all. Not only that, they're playing really well against receiving backs, which is Jerick's one strength. They only had one player with a good receiving game against them when Gio Bernard had 3 receptions for 67 and a touchdown against them. Oh, and they also have played Lev Bell, DeMarco Murray, the tandem of Lamar and Deontay Foreman, and Bilal Powell, who are all really good receiving backs. All this equals Jerick being the ghost of the week. I like him for 62 total yards, no touchdowns.
All right, there you have it. Those are the ghosts for this week. And now I'm not prematurely jumping into daily fantasy. I'm just really excited about daily fantasy. So let's talk about it. We're going to try and give you guys who are going to cost you a little bit less, but we believe are going to give you really good production for what you're going to spend on them. It's going to free up some cash for you to use in other areas of your team for some of those more expensive players. So let's give you our daily fantasy values here. I'm going to go first. I don't have a ton on this. This is really largely a gut feeling, and based on how I've seen him come along in the offense the past couple weeks here, I'm going with Christian McCaffrey of the Carolina Panthers for $6,300. The Bucs are giving up an average of 6 catches per game to opposing backs this year, and Christian McCaffrey is coming off of a 2-game stretch where he's been utilized quite a bit more, and he's got 17 catches combined in those 2 games. He's a dynamic playmaker. I know I use that phrase a lot, but there's a lot of guys that really fit that, and it's kind of what I look for, in a player that I like, especially in fantasy. You need to be more versatile. So he's going to give you a ton of opportunities to get not only points for those receptions, but receiving yards, because it's easier for a guy his stature to pick up yards in the receiving game than it is between the tackles at this point. Carolina realizes they have to get him more involved over these last 2 weeks. They've been getting him more involved in the passing attack. The Bucs have given up a touchdown to every single opposing back that they've faced this year, whether it's on the ground or through the air. They've given up 1 to every major fantasy back they've played this year. Past 2 games, the backs have multiple touchdowns against them. So I like Christian McCaffrey this week. That position overall for the Panthers is a lot of turmoil right now. They don't have a true identity at running back, but when you got to try and figure something out and get a playmaker in there, I like McCaffrey. 10 catches this week, 89 yards and a touchdown, 11 carries, 67 yards. Christian McCaffrey, $6,300 daily fantasy play of the week for me. Deal, who do you got for us?
My daily player is Cam Brate, tight end, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, for $5,800. He hasn't had a game this year, at least in the last 5 weeks, with less than 9 points. And I know that OJ had a great game last week with 2 big scores, but Cam was still a huge part of the offense. Now, OJ has taken over 51% of snap counts last week versus Cam's 38%. But Cam is still getting way more targets. He had 9 targets while OJ only had 6. And on the season, Cam has 39 targets opposed to OJ's 18. Only Ertz, Gronk, and Kelsey have seen more targets than Cam, and only Ertz and Gronk are averaging more points per game than him. Twice in the past 3 weeks, the Panthers have given up 2 touchdowns to a tight end, and the other week they played the Bears, so that doesn't even count. I like Cam this week for 6 receptions, 72 yards, and a touchdown. He needs to be owned for value this week.
All right, Miles, round this thing out for us with your daily fantasy value.
Yeah, I got to shoot straight. When we do this segment, I almost never roster my own guy.
None of the 3 of you do. It drives me crazy.
I don't have – listen, my reasoning is what it is. I think it's because I generally try to find running back value on this, and then I go expensive when my money's actually on it.
On the line.
But
yep.
Actually, I did last week. I rostered Derrick Henry last week. I just wasn't on pod to talk about it. But this is a guarantee. You can write this down. I will be rostering my daily play this week. If you actually look at the prices, at least on FanDuel, which is what we tend to use as a site for us, there's a big clump of running backs that all cost from like $5,900 to $6,400. There's a bunch of them. And I would bet almost every lineup is going to have one of these guys. So to win money, you're going to have to pick the right one. For me, for $6,100 is unquestionably my boy LeGarrette Blount from Philadelphia. Blount comes in, he's well under the studs. That's not what you should expect. He's not putting up Lev Bell numbers. Who does? But that's why he's $3,000 cheaper. What I love is he's facing off against a Niners defense that is giving up the most fantasy points to running backs this season in half-point PPR, which is what FanDuel uses. They've given up 90-plus to 4 different backs. They've allowed 9 running back touchdowns. 9. South just made a big deal of the Colts allowing 8. I'm pretty good at math. 9 is more.
That is.
Okay, it's more than 8. All right, Blount, he's been solid if unspectacular this year, but outside of a Week 2 Chiefs game where he registered 0 carries for some reason, he has gotten at least 12 carries in every game this season for the Eagles, and he's averaging over 5 yards per carry for Philadelphia. The Eagles have been killing people through the air lately, but I expect this to be a game script that really lends itself a lot more to LeGarrette Blount. They should get an early lead, you would expect, with the Niners having to travel across the country. The Niners aren't very good. If you haven't heard, the Eagles are playing pretty well. That when you get that early lead, and he's not going to be a big part of that through the air, obviously. But that second half should be LeGarrette Blount left, LeGarrette Blount right, LeGarrette Blount up the gut. I actually love him to finish with 21 carries, 115 yards, and 2 scores on the ground. I don't think he's going to touch the ball in through the air, but with that stat line for $6,100, you do not care. Let me put this Niners thing in perspective real quick. Zeke Elliott had 220 total yards and 3 touchdowns last week. LeGarrette Blount is not as good as Zeke Elliott, but all he has to do is be a little better than half as good as Zeke Elliott, and he's giving you great value for $6,100. I think he's half as good as Zeke Elliott, so I'm giving him 115 and 2 scores on the ground. You're going to be thrilled to death with almost 24 points out of what should be your RB2 in daily fantasy.
All right. Well, and if I'm a little bit better than half as good as other players in fantasy this week, maybe I can get back on track.
There you go.
All right. Let's hit on one question real quick here. All right. This is a question, multi-quarterback here. This comes in from DC Ryder. Wants to know, got to start 2 of 3, Cousins, Wentz, and Ryan.
I don't have Cousins in I have a 2 QB league where I am starting Ryan and Wentz this week. Now it's over Cam. I really like Cousins against Dallas. I got to tell you, I would go. Remind me, who's Matt Ryan have?
The Jets.
They have the Jets. I'm gonna go with Cousins and Wentz.
Can I start all three?
Yeah, those are three. I mean,
I'd love to start all three.
You know what? Actually, based on what I just said about Blunt, if I really believe that, I should probably be sitting Wentz here, because I think of the 3 games, that's the one that's got the biggest opportunity to get really out of hand, and Smallwood and Blunt are going to take over. So let me rephrase. I would go Ryan and Cousins.
I can't sit Wentz still.
I'm struggling with that. You have to start Cousins because that's the game that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the game that's got almost no blowout chance.
It's Wentz and Cousins for me. I mean, it's number one. Wentz has been most consistent of all of them, so
Right.
I can't sit him and think, well, what if he just keeps playing the way he's been? I don't even need him to do better. I just need him to do what he's done all season. Right. And Ryan has been up and down. And Kirk, I think this is the moment where he takes off, and it's like, oh, yeah, Kirk Cousins is good. We forgot. So, yeah, it's Wentz and Kirk for me.
Yeah, I'm going with Wentz and Kirk as well. Wentz is the league MVP at this point. I'm not keeping him out of anything. And Kirk, I think he already had that moment where he was like, hey, I'm really good. Don't forget it. This past couple of weeks, he's played really good. It's not really his fault that the defense has not held up their end of the bargain. And they're very banged up as well on defense. Right. So, that plays into it too. But I expect them to get a couple guys in their secondary back healthy this week against Dallas. And you could throw all over the yard on Dallas. So Kirk is the kind of guy who's going to do it. So those are my 2 guys. I'm going to reluctantly sit Matt Ryan.
Yeah, it's crazy. I shook my head when Deal said about Wentz being the most consistent. I think it's so easy to still allow your preseason, you work so hard in your preseason stuff, and it's easy to allow that to still control your thoughts as a fantasy owner, where you're not looking at Wentz as a consistent elite fantasy quarterback. It's exactly what he's been, and Ryan has not. So you can't sit Kirk. I agree with what South just said. They lost the game, but he just put up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Birds.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's got to be Cousins and Wentz.
It's that preconceived notion is the same reason why Alex Smith is quarterback 14 this week, because you picture Alex Smith for what he is historically, and then you add the fact that, oh, well, it's Denver, so he can't be good, but he's been great. So you got to kind of look past that. So
yeah, I picked Alex Smith up off of free agency in a 1 quarterback league last week. He carried me to a win. He's the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. But he's Alex Smith, so it's a great question because it does challenge your thought process of, are you going to take players for how they're playing? Or are you going to overreact based on what you thought for months leading up to the season? You're right. You can't sit Wentz right now.
Nope.
It's got to be him and Cousins.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for this week's edition of the show. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the show this week. You're feeling good about fantasy football heading into week 8. I'm usually feeling good about fantasy football heading into the week. A lot of times I'm not feeling so good afterwards. But hey, my teams are scoring a ton of points. I'm just not winning. So, whatever. Be sure to stay tuned to footballgoons.com for all of our updates each and every week. Every week, Miles is putting out his power rankings. And if you're not reading those, you're missing some really good write-ups about each team heading into and coming out of the previous week. A lot of good stuff crammed into those power rankings. They're only at footballgoons.com, so check them out every single week. They are up by midweek, just about every week at this point. Also, we're encouraging you guys, subscribe to our email list. There's no cost to you. There's no spam. There's no junk email. We're not selling your email address off to anybody. You're going to get 1 email midweek every week that's going to be your one-stop shop for everything that we put out that week. The podcast, our YouTube content, the power rankings, anything else going on, contests, whatever. It's all right there in the email. You don't have to even look for it. It comes right to your phone or your email box. We're doing all the work for you there. Check us out on social media as well, facebook.com/footballgoons, on the Twitter. We are at Football Goons, and right here on our YouTube channel, the Football Goons YouTube channel. Subscribe and comment. Leave us comments. If you don't catch the show on time or you get us after the fact, whatever, we'll still answer your questions. So make sure you get those into us. We always try to respond to our loyal fans every single week and give you guys the best insight that we possibly can. We'll catch you guys next time.